Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Chatting with the Rev. Today we're going to, first of all, I want to explain what happened on yesterday, my normal broadcast day. I went down to the City Hall in Philadelphia to testify before the Transportation Committee concerning our public and paratransit systems run by the SEPTA Incorporated Company. We discussed some things as it relates to people with challenged abilities, myself included, and I was happy to be a part of that important, very important session. Good afternoon to my wife, Lady T, evangelist, prophetess, Teresa Jeanette Scott. And there were many people that were, well, not many, but there were quite a few people that were testifying, witnessing to the issues that impact not just our lives, but the lives of many people, not just here in Philadelphia, but throughout the country in terms of transportation. Yes, most of us have accessibility to the vehicles. Buses have ramps now, have lifts now. They can easily allow us to get on board. But sometimes the challenges of the drivers and even the passengers, the able-bodied passengers, the attitudes and the problems that they seem to have in allowing us to be full participants as citizens of this country. We too have a right to go to a doctor's office or to the store, or for recreational fun to go down to the museums or the Walnut Street theaters and the like, movie house and the like, without feeling as though we're imposing on somebody, that we're impeding on their rights just to get out and be about. See, we've been closed up so long, we've been shut away so long, we've been isolated so long that neither the public nor we ourselves feel comfortable in intermingling one with another. It's a sad commentary, to say the least. And no legislation, no law, no regulation, no stipulation can change people's attitudes. On the SEPTA buses, it's clear that the first two benches say that those who are seniors and those who are disabled have preferential treatment when they want to board the buses, because the trolleys, which we also have, are not accessible, but the buses are, and many of the L's are. And it says right there, you have to give way. In other words, you have to give your seat up. And for someone who's a senior, or someone who is disabled, or like myself, someone who's a senior and disabled, get on the bus. My wife has experienced it now that her lupus has flared up, and now since she's had her hip surgery, sometimes she has to travel by way of a walker or even by way of a wheelchair herself, and she has to avail herself of using the bus to go here and there. We don't have a vehicle ourselves, neither a van nor a car, so we have to avail ourselves of the public transportation system. And she has met with some prejudicial, biased treatment, both from the bus drivers and from her fellow passengers and my fellow passengers. Somehow or another, this doesn't seem right, that we should be out and about, that we should be out participating in the privileges and the liberties of this nation. I was born in the United States of America. I'm not a naturalized citizen. I'm not an immigrant. I'm not anything of that nature. I was born right here in Pennsylvania, Derby, to be exact, a borough in the state of Pennsylvania. My mother and father both were born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. All of us going way back have been born in the United States of America. Don't even know a time when our family wasn't here on these shores. Going back to great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-greats. And yet when you have a physical, developmental, or a mental challenge somehow or another, you just are not supposed to be a part of. You should be comfortable being excluded in your rooms, in your hospital bed. sitting there in the house all the time. I asked someone who's able-bodied once, would you want to trade places with me? What would your life be if all you could be is in the house all the time? You have to make sure the weather is not inclement, and you have to make sure there's not a whole lot of rain going on and a lot of snow going on the outside. You have to make sure that your wheelchair is charged and is able to maintain the charge throughout your entire journey outside the house. I've been stuck. My wheelchair is broken down on me mid one time in the middle of the street. Very recently, I had my other wheelchair, the one my wife utilizes, to be brought to me so I could use that to get home, because my main wheelchair, the one I'm sitting in now, was not functioning correctly and not properly, and I had to get home the best way I could. I had to call, I had to wait, it was cold. But I refused to give in. I refuse to sit at home and vegetate until the day I die. I have every right, I always have had that right, to be a part of this society, to enjoy myself, to pursue life, liberty, and to pursue happiness. Like I always say, and I'll say it until the day I leave this world, people with physical challenges, people with developmental challenges, people with mental challenges, we matter too. Challenged ability people matter too. Because we are people. Just as human, just as emotional, just as needing of companionship and camaraderie and social activity and interaction as anybody else. Maybe more so because of the challenges we have to face. Maybe more so because we are oftentimes limited by our condition to do certain things at certain times. But I'm here to tell you that today is a new day. Maybe this nation needs a Donald Trump to unify us and to get ourselves off of our own self-interest and begin to look at each other and the needs that each of us share and the needs that each of us have to enjoy the privileges of this nation. Some of us have never fully appreciated the greatness of this nation, as we're so willing to say. Some of us have never experienced that in its fullness. It hasn't always been great. It hasn't always been kind. It hasn't always been tolerable. Has not always been compassionate and understanding and merciful. It hasn't always been that way for a lot of us in this population. I'm an African American who also has a physical challenge. So I know it from all kinds of angles. From a racial perspective as well as a physical perspective. I've seen the biases. I've seen the injustices. Good afternoon, Sister Robin Lynn. Good to see you, Robert. Good to see you. He says, many times our difficulties come from other people's attitudes rather than the disability itself. And that is true. I've said it often, and I'll say it again, that a lot of times the disability does not lie in the physical condition that we have, but rather the way society looks at us, treats us, responds to us, and refuses to respond to us. That disables us, if you will. That limits us, if you will. That brings us to a place of disadvantage. That does make it hard for us to achieve anything in life. We have to press. We have to push. We have to climb over the attitudes of people sometimes. Today I want to talk very briefly, and I want to talk very briefly about the state of people with challenged abilities in this country. The state of people with challenged abilities in the United States of America. That's what we want to talk a little bit about today. You know, it's hard to believe that it's been since 1990, nearly 27 years ago, it will be this year, since the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, was made into law by President H.W. Bush, rather. George Bush's father, back in the 90s, 27 years ago. And the purpose of the ADA was to prohibit discrimination against people with physical, mental, and developmental challenges in all areas of public life, which includes jobs, schools, transportation, housing, and in all public and private places that are open to the general public. Now, I'm going to tell you, there is an exception to this, and that's the faith-based institutions, churches, synagogues, mosques. Because of the non-documented yet adhered to rule that there's a separation between church and state, some of the stipulations made in the ADA are not binding to the faith community. And yet, in my mind, because it is a faith community, one that espouses love and compassion and charity, not pity, but charity to others, that extends a helping hand to their brothers and sisters, that there should be no governmental mandate upon the church. There should be no governmental mandate upon a synagogue. It should be no governmental mandate upon a mosque or any other religious organization, a Buddhist temple or whatever. That should come directly from the faith community. They should be leading the way in making their houses of worship accessible. Good afternoon, Sister Felicia. They should lead the way, not ordered to do it, not made to do it, but they should be leading the way. The government can't make them do it, but why should the government make them do it? Why should the government tell a church you should have a ramp to allow people in wheelchairs to worship? You should have a Braille literature, whether it be a Bible, whether it be the Quran, whatever the case may be. You need to have the Torah, no matter what the case may be. You should have a Braille library in your church that those who are blind can avail themselves of the scriptures and learn of the scriptures. You should have TTY machines. You should have interpreters, deaf interpreters. Robert says many churches say they must obey the laws of the land. The only churches that are obliged to fulfill the mandates as specified in the ADA are those that are taking governmental funds. Once you take governmental funds, there is no such thing as separation of church then. Your monies are being used, are being given to you by the government, so now you are under their stipulation. But if you are a church like many churches that do not take any funds from the government, but actually do receive their donations, their tithes, their offerings from the congregation alone, then they're not obligated. It's only those that take monies from the state, the local, or the federal government that are now obliged to obey the mandates made by the state, the federal, or the local government that they receive funds from. But I'm going to tell you the truth. Why should the church have to feel they have to obey? Obey? Welcoming everybody? Christ himself said it in St. Luke chapter 14, that we are supposed to look for the ones who are lame and the blind and the maimed. Look at St. Luke chapter 14, and you'll see how he says when he had his feast And the servant said that everybody had an excuse. He had invited a man, but he said, I couldn't. He invited one man, and he said, I can't come because I'm getting married. He invited another man. He couldn't come because he had just bought some oxen. Another man just bought some land. They had to look at it. They had to review it, and they couldn't come. They refused his invitation. And so the Lord told the servant to go into all the hedges and highways. He first said, go to the lame and the maimed and the blind and the halt. Then the servant said, there's still more room at the feast table. He said, well, go into the highways and byways and compel men, women, boys, girls, anybody that you see, compel them to come on in. And those that I invited in the first place, who had something better to do, we're going to close the doors and they will not be welcome. So we're supposed to go and find those people in wheelchairs. We're supposed to go and look for them, not because some government somewhere tells us to do it. Hello, Stephanie. Not because the government compels us to go out into the highways and find people that are physically challenged or mentally challenged or developmentally challenged. That should be the desire of a Christian. That should be a desire of a Muslim. That should be the desire of a Jewish man or woman. That's what your faith is all about. Your faith is about reaching the disenfranchised. The least likely that the world wants to shun. The world wants to turn away. The world wants to refuse to help. We're supposed to say, bring them here. We'll help them. Bring them here. We'll accept them. Bring them here. We'll include them. Greetings to you, Apostle Greenleaf. The church has failed. Has failed miserably. But I'm not saying every church. There's no church that has any program. That's not true. There are many churches that do, but too many. More than that do, there are more that don't. It's too much money. Yeah, didn't I just see you put a new set of pews in? Too much money. Oh, but didn't I see you negotiate to buy a new building? Too much money. But didn't I see you just install some stained glass windows? It's too much money to help people. But it's always enough money. We can always find enough money. We'll raise enough money to build a building. But let me tell you, there's no building, no matter how luxurious, no matter how beautiful, no matter how wonderful, no matter how magnificent and marvelous it may appear. There's no building that's going to heaven. When Christ said, I go to prepare a place, he didn't mean for that church on the corner. He didn't mean that cathedral, even if it is a glass cathedral. He didn't mean that building that can seat 35,000 comfortably in plush chairs. He didn't mean that. Hello, Arthur. When he said, I go to prepare a place for you, he's talking about people. And let me tell you right now, churches that don't include people that have physical, developmental, and mental challenges, God's going to hold you accountable for not including them, because he means for you to go. To invite them to the feast. To invite them to the table, to sit and to commune and to fellowship with you. Not so that they can be healed. And that may be a consequence. That may be what does happen. Yes, there may be a healing going on. Yes, there may be a revival going on. Yes, they may be able to walk out the wheelchair and can hear clearly again. But that should not be the purpose why you want them to come to church. I want you to come to church because you have a soul to save too. You have a heaven to gain or a hell to avoid too. When the Lord said, come unto me, all ye who are weak and heavy laden, my goodness, that includes us sure enough. about it? Paul had a physical challenge, a thorn in the flesh. Moses had a speech impediment. He was not a respecter of persons. He used the least likely people. Because when you're the least likely, the miracle that you wrought is even more magnified and it's more impressive. And you see the power of God in St. John chapter 9, when it talks about that blind man and they asked him who sinned. Was it the blind man? Was it his mother or was it his father? He said neither the blind man nor his mother nor his father sinned, but that God will get the glory from it. My wife said, and that's so true, and I say it all the time. You know, Moses, we always got to dress it up, don't we? We bring Charlton Heston, the most eloquent speaker, to play Moses, and he wasn't eloquent speaker at all. In fact, he's had a thick tongue. Yes, he did. But he took his thick tongue and led 9 million people out of Egypt's land who were slaves. Jacob, after wrestling with that angel, he limped away, and it said in the Bible, he limped away forever. When Jacob said, I'm not going to let you go, angel of the Lord, which was the pre-incarnate Christ. When he said it to the angel of the Lord, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. He didn't mean to make me whole again physically. He mean bless my life. Turn my life around. Make me a different man. I was a trickster. I was a schemer. But I want to be a different man. I want to be a better man. Bless me that way. Not with the hip being put back in place. Because he walked away, the Bible tells me in Genesis. He walked away with the limp. He lived that limp for the rest of his life. But he was a different man. So much so that they changed his name from Jacob, which means supplanter and deceiver, to Israel, which means he prevailed against God and against himself, man. Worried about all this physical stuff. Whether it's physical healing, physical prosperity, physical this, physical that. You better worry about your soul. And you better worry about the souls of your brothers and sisters who have physical, developmental, and mental challenges too. It's up to the church. It's up to the synagogue. It's up to the mosque. It's up to every religious group that professes to know God. That you better go out there and compel men and women of all stripes, irrespective of race, color, creed, or ability. What's the state of this country? 27 years after the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, was approved. What is the situation of this country? Well, thank you for dropping by, Apostle. We appreciate that. God bless you. Well, let me tell you something. Yes, we have rights by law, but like I say, the law is no more than what man interprets the law to be and what man will do with that law to enforce it. How does society perceive us here in the year 2017, 27 years after the ADA was made into law? Well, here in Philadelphia, that's why I was at that meeting on yesterday and wasn't with you. That meeting yesterday, there at City Hall, I heard many testimonies, some horrific testimonies, about how people have been really neglected and left to stay even in the weather. They just dropped them off. They didn't even care whether the person had anybody home. There was someone that was dropped off at his house after waiting 2 hours to get back home. And there was nobody in the house to welcome him in. He had to stay outside for 2 more hours. Because the bus driver just left him. Another instance, the bus driver stayed but was complaining and was just, it was awful. The persons were so uncomfortable, they actually left the bus. And just stayed wherever they were staying until somebody came back home to let them in the house. People had to wait hours to get to an appointment, and they had to be turned away once they got to the appointment because they were too late. I've had that happen to me. Had to wait, calling the people, telling the people I had to go to. It was a doctor's appointment. You know, they have a time thing. You know, you can't just walk in there any old kind of way when you have an appointment. I had to call them as I was on, well, first before I got on the bus, because it was already so late. Could I still come? Yes, if you come within 15 minutes of after your appointment time, we'll accept you. Here I'm on the bus. They had to travel all over the place to drop off everyone else. I understand that. But you already were late picking me up. If you would have been on time picking me up, you could have taken in consideration all the other people you had to drop off. But because you were late picking me up, now here I'm on the bus waiting to get to my appointment. By the time I got there, it was too late. Now I have to wait for the bus to come back because now I'm too early to get the bus going back home. So I'm sitting there waiting. People came after me because they were on time. They pushing by me. Good afternoon, Pastor Mark Tyler. So what is the state of people with disabilities in this nation right now? The state of people with challenged abilities. What is it? First of all, I'll tell you the truth. We have been challenged. Crimes are at the highest rate right now. Crimes against people with physical challenges, developmental challenges, mental challenges. It's at the highest rate. Even some of the people that we know that have been abused in terms of police brutality. If you look at them, they talk about the racial aspect to it, but most of them also had physical disabilities. I think of Eric Garner, who was choked to death in New York just for selling loose cigarettes. Oh, what a dastardly crime. Choked. But did you know that he also had a heart condition? He had chronic asthma. He was obese. And he had all these issues, as well as him being a black man. Also played a part in his death. You don't hold somebody by the neck, hold them down with your elbow, which is supposed to be against the law, the kind of the chokehold they put upon the man. It's supposed to be against the law. It really is, but nobody enforces it. We know that because there wasn't even an indictment against those police officers. The grand jury didn't even go to a trial. The grand jury dismissed it. Of course, a black man with a disability, who's least on the totem pole? Black man with a disability. Who's the least amongst them? Then we had Sharon Bland there in Texas. She was stopped for a traffic violation because she wouldn't put out her cigarette. I don't know what these cigarettes have to do with anything, but it looked like there's a lot of attachment to these cigarettes. Because she wouldn't put out the cigarette as the officer ordered her to, he arrested her, put her in a cell. Came back a little while later. Someone came back from one of the police officers or whomever, came back, checked on her. There she was hanging. Now, she was diagnosed with being a manic depressive. And she also had epilepsy. Who's to say that she didn't have an epileptic attack? You know, the family don't even believe that she was hung. They believe something else. And even some of the members of the community believe there was something else. But we know one thing, she also had a disability. In fact, two physical challenges. Epilepsy, which is also a mental challenge as well, but it's all tied to the brain. And she was a manic depressive. So she had 2 disabilities, as did Eric Garner. Hello, Andrew. Over and over again, I can tell you other instances. Ethan Saylor. Now, there was a white young boy who had Down syndrome. He paid for the first time seeing a movie. He went to the movie house there in Maryland, and he went to see that picture, and he enjoyed the picture so much he wanted to see it again. But he didn't have the other $12. The manager asked him for the $12. He said he didn't have it. He called upon 3 off-duty police officers who moonlighted as security guards, and they came and threw him to the ground, and he died of asphyxiation. Because he wanted to see a movie a second time and didn't have the extra $12. His aide was right there. She'd gone to get the car because in between the two, after the first showing of the movie, she naturally went to get the car to take him home. In between time, he kept on sitting there arguing with the manager. He wanted to see the movie again. Manager being upset, got the police involved, security guard, whatever you want to call them, and they eventually choked him to death. I'm glad you just stopped by to see us. Over and over again, so the crime rate has increased since the ADA. And it's still rising even today. You know the case there in Idaho about the young black boy? He's actually a black high school student, 18 years old, part of a football team. His colleagues, white young men who were part of that same team, had been harassing him all the school year because he was one of the only blacks in the school, and they were harassing him, making fun, racial slurs at him. Eventually, they actually sodomized him with a hanger over and over again. And then there in Chicago, 4 black young people beat up and tortured a white young man, once again with another mental illness. Both of them had mental challenges. What's happening in this world today? What's happening in this world today? Which would have, see, I tell you, attitudes, and I can tell you this for a fact, attitudes don't change. We know that, don't we? Civil rights movement was back in 1964, and we still got an issue with racism and all of this type of thing. Even now, electing a man who openly is anti this and anti that, and we just still elected him. Made fun of people with disabilities, still elected him as the 45th president of the United States. Where are we? Where are we going? I think about the Roman Empire. I think about the Grecian Empire. And as they became more corrupted in their morals and in their standards and in their decency one towards another, the sooner they became part of history. Now, Rome's a city in a small country. Greece, another small nation. Shadows of what they once were in history. So you can't treat people any old kind of way and expect to keep on growing and keep on getting stronger and better and bigger. When you disrespect one person, eventually it all comes full circle back to you. It happens that way. It happens that way. So, first of all, crimes against people with disabilities, people with challenged abilities, I like to call it. And that was a phrase coined by my wife, and I love it so much because we know what disability means. Disability means being limited, disadvantaged, and disqualified to do anything. And I'm not any one of those three. So I'm not disabled. I have challenged abilities. See, it's what you call people. And what those words mean, we don't understand. And we who understand words and the significance of words and what they really mean. Chaplain Andrew says, when we grew up, we had family surrounding us, teaching us, nurturing us, not just mothers and fathers, but uncles, aunts, grandparents, and today children are growing up all by themselves. We went to church. We learned how to be decent one toward another. And if we weren't, we were corrected. Oh, yeah, I had people mock me too. Even, and Andrew should know this because we were classmates there at Ridge Avenue School in Darby. I was made fun of. I was, ostracized at times. But you had your family there to support you. And they prodded me on. And then I eventually ended up being a preacher at 12 years old, preaching my first sermon at Mount Zion AME Church in Darby. And then went on my ministry and my pastoring over these many years. It was because somebody saw something in me that was worth more than what others saw outside of me. They looked at me more than the book cover. They decided to turn the pages, open up the book and turn the pages and see the content of what was inside the book and not just look at the book cover. I remember one time, and I'll share this with you very quickly. I remember one time when I was in my kindergarten class, in my Sunday school class there at Mount Zion AME Church in Darby, and a Miss Mabel Jackson. I've shared this before, but it's worth noting again. A Miss Mabel Jackson, she was the kindergarten teacher, and everybody would say, "Gerald, stop talking so loud. Stop talking so loud. You talk too loud." But I had a good memory, and I was one of the ones they would always allow to say the parts and the major roles. I would always do it. I would do it through memory, not through like they do now, reading the script and somebody stand before you and mouthing the words and you mimic it. No, I learned these parts. But I always had the big voice. From an infant baby, asked my mother. From an infant baby, I was loud. Always been loud. Loud now. And so they were saying, "Quiet it down. Why you got to be so loud?" She said, "Leave him alone. Miss Mabel Jackson, leave him alone," she said. I wish others would be as bold. I wish others could project themselves the way he projects themselves and not stood up there all timid and weak-mouthed and not project themselves. Let him alone. Let him be who he is. I had pastors coming along. They said, "Man, Scott, you too loud. You need to tone that down." I said, "I was taught a long time ago. I'm not going to tone nothing down." God gave me a voice for a reason. He didn't give me two good legs because I wasn't meant to be a Carl Lewis. He didn't give me two good legs because I wasn't meant to be a Jesse Owens. He didn't give me two good legs like that. What he gave me was a voice, and he wants me to project that voice and utilize that voice and magnify whatever I need to magnify and speak whatever I need to speak and to be appreciative of the gift he gave me. And you're appreciative of the gift he gave you by using it to its fullest capacity. And I've always used it to my fullest capacity. My wife will tell you. People used to listen to me even at churches like St. Matthew in Philadelphia. "I need no mic." Mic? For what? Give that to Mike. Mike maybe need it. I don't need it. I was at the city council meeting yesterday. They said, "You don't need no mic." The chairman of the transportation committee, after the councilman said to me, he said, "You didn't need no mic, did you?" I said, "No, this chamber is too small for me. I don't need no mic." Because that's what God gave me to use. And I thank God for it. So the second point is, nearly 1 out of 3 people who live in poverty, disabled people live in poverty. 1 out of 3. Of disabled people with challenged ability, they live in poverty. 1 out of 3 live in poverty. It's sad, isn't it? It's sad. Yes, we have, it says here, and I want to read this statistic. It says, because it's from the Labor Committee, it says that though we have advanced and progressed in ensuring that places are physically accessible, the U.S. Senate's Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee finds that, and this is their finding now, that major social and economic barriers remain. Major social and economic barriers remain. Sad, isn't it? I can get on the bus, but I can't get a job. I can get on the bus, but sometimes I can't afford to pay the token cost or the bus fare cost or the transfer cost to get on the bus. Once again, social and economic disadvantages remain. And that's the next point I want to talk about. We want to talk about the job situation. Yes, the law of 1990, the ADA, has made it so that I can go into the supermarket now and in many stores and the aisles are widened. Yes, there are ramps that are in schools. Yes, I can get on a bus now. They got ramps and they got lifts. So yes, I can do all that. But once I get on the bus, sometimes that attitude, if I could do it another way, I would do it another way. It's attitude. It's about social attitudes. It's about economic attitudes. And jobs are created and sustained by people. That's who the employers are. They're people. And if they have a bias, if they have a prejudice, then they're not going to employ you. Or if they do, it's going to be like, the surprising thing to me is this. There is a law that was made in 1938 during the time of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who himself had polio. And there was a law that was there was a bill signed into law called the Fair Labor Act. And it allowed employers to pay persons with disabilities or challenged abilities less than the minimum wage if they chose to. Now, this is a 1938 law that's still on the book and still is being implemented by some of these companies even today. Those that go out to recruit people that have challenged abilities, many of them are paid wages that are lower than the minimum wage. Hello, Patricia. Pat. This is 2017. That was a 1938 law. It's still enacted. And during the years, it's gotten worse. Because at one point it was, you couldn't pay them any less than 50% less than the minimum wage. Now it's you can pay them whatever you want to pay them. We talked about a while back now, in one of our sessions, one of our meetings here, in one of our broadcasts, we talked about how many goodwill industry folk, businesses, companies, buildings, stores, pay their employees 28 cents an hour. 28 cents an hour. And I know some people that wouldn't even go to work for $6 now. That's too little. And hey, you got people working for 28 cents an hour. And ironically, the president of Goodwill Industries International himself is blind. And his thing is, well, they're all happy just to be working at all. It gives them something to do. My goodness. Gives them something to do. But where is the humanity? Where is the equality? You're someone who's blind, and maybe you were privileged. You know, some of us too. I mean, most of us don't have much, but there's still that 1 out of 3, that one. Those other 2, you know, that you want to add up, the other 2, they maybe have a little more of a means, if you will. But people know that people with physical challenges are not treated the same in employment as other people. They're the last hired, first fired. They're fired for any little infraction. Most time they work harder than anybody else, but maybe they can't do certain things as quickly or as proficiently or like everybody else can, so they're considered not fitting into the mold. No one wants to accommodate them. Maybe the little thing they may have, they may not be able to stand long. You mean you can't get a chair for them to sit in for a minute or two? Come on, people. Come on. What's the state of the affairs of this nation as it relates to people with physical challenges? I'm gonna talk to you right now about promises that they call it. It's from the PolitiFact group, and it's a fact-finding group. They look at what politicians say, and then they monitor it and see whether what they say is in truth what it is and what they're going to fulfill. And this one is called Promises About Disability on the Obama Meter. The first one is, I'm not going to read all of them because it's just too lengthy and we don't have enough time for that. But I'm going to read a few of them. It says the one thing that was promised is he was going to sign the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Most countries, most of the Western countries and most of the advanced countries signed this petition, signed this enactment for the rights of persons with disability internationally. But the United States did not sign it. It's a promise that Obama made, but let me tell you this, in this instance, I know this for a fact, it wasn't a lot of Obama's fault in this instance. It was Congress's fault in this instance, the Republican-led Congress that fell through with this, and of course he couldn't promise what they refused to do. But this was a promise that was broken. We were going to sign the UN rights for those persons with disabilities. But the United States Senate refused to do it. Next thing, fully fund the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, called the IDEA. Another broken promise. It was never made into an effect. Once again, Congress promised to shoulder 40% of each state's excess costs of educating children with disabilities, but it has never lived up to its obligations. Currently, the federal government provides less than half of the promised funding for those who have physical, mental, and developmental disabilities. Refuse to do it. So a lot of the things that the president couldn't do, it's sad to say, it wasn't because he wouldn't want to have done it, but rather the Congress refused to enact the things that he would like to have seen done. Good afternoon, Apostle Simpson. We could go on and on and on. I'm going to say some of the things that he did promise, that he was able to push through. One thing that he was able to push through was, let me read it to you because I don't want to make any mistakes here. It was a commission on a study on students with disabilities and their transition to jobs or higher education. Thank you, Apostle Simpson. Love my haircut. He was able to keep that promise. He was able to keep the promise to reinstate order to hire 100,000 more federal employees with disabilities within 5 years. He was able to keep that promise. He was able to keep the promise to set goals and timetables for implementing Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act, which is to requires the federal government and employers who are federal contractors to take affirmative action to employ and advance in employment qualified individuals with disabilities. So he had some successes and some failures in keeping the promises that he made to the disabled community or to the community with people with challenged abilities. Now, what about now? What about now? What about now? Well, we know already that this president, President Donald J. Trump Sr., Quadir, good afternoon, that this president has already begun, and the Congress right along with him, has already begun to dismantle Obamacare. We know that he's going to significantly alter Medicaid, going to make it into a block grant fund instead of a shared fund, or what we call you give 50% and I give matching funds. Right now it's under matching funds. What that means is that he's every dollar that the state spends on someone who has a physical, developmental, or mental challenge, or someone just who has a challenge that's on Obamacare, the federal government matches that fund. Now they're going to do just the opposite. Medicaid is going to be under a block grant fund, which means that the federal government will give the state X amount of dollars, and the state will use those dollars however way they see necessary for those dollars to be used. Once they're used up, they're used up. There's no matching fund. They're used up. We're looking at a lot of things here in these next 4 years, and really right now he's moving very quickly. He's only been president less than 2 weeks, and he's moving very, very quickly. And some of the things are not even related to us in terms of physical challenges, at least not directly. But he's doing some things that is going to really alter the way this country operates, alter the way we look at one another. There's going to be more suspicion, less a spirit of oneness, more disjointed, disunity amongst the people of this nation. But we have to keep our eyes on what's happening. I invite you to keep on tuning in normally Monday. We were away yesterday, but we're here today. And I'll be back on Friday. And we're not talking about dwell on things. We're not talking about harping on things. We're not talking about, preoccupying your whole life around this. What we need to do is know what we need to do. We need to start strategizing. We need to start organizing. We need to start doing something. Protest is good. I always say that marching is wonderful, and they used it, I know for a fact, in the 1950s and 60s during the Civil Rights Movement. They used it very effectively. Why? Because they didn't just march for a little while. They didn't only march, but they did some other things. The bus boycott was over a year before the bus company finally broke down and acquiesced to the demands made by the civil rights leaders, Dr. Martin Luther King and the like. Other things that were toppled, other things that were defeated, took years to do. That Civil Rights Act of 1964, it wasn't just made up in 1964. This act was really as old as this country, really, in some respects. But it was actually, the way it was formed now, Hubert Humphrey really presented that to the 1948 convention, Democratic Convention. Almost 20 years before it was enacted. And through hook and crook, and through diligence and through perseverance and through sacrifice, it was finally passed in 1964. And just like the ADA, many of the things that were done then have been rolled back now. In some ways, we're even more displaced than ever before as a race of people. The same thing holds true with people who have physical, developmental, and mental challenges, these challenged ability folk, like myself. The intentions of the ADA were fine, but the attitudes have altered. There still are very little housing for people with physical, developmental, and mental challenges. One of the promises that was somewhat broken was that Obama was trying to push for there to be more openness in allowing people that have been institutionalized back into the general public. Institutionalized in houses for people with developmental, or in particular developmental and mental situations. He wanted to incorporate them back into society. And it was never fulfilled because people just don't want to be about that. We're a nation of one. A melting pot means you put the carrots, the potatoes, the peas, the meat, everything into the one pot. And after you put them all together, let them cook together, even cooking means sometimes it's going to get hot. But once you dish it out and put it in the bowl, it's a delicious stew. It's a delicious soup. It's a delicious dish that you can enjoy. A little bit of potato here, and on top of that, a little bit of the chicken, or a little bit of the beef, or a little bit of the lamb, whatever the case may be. Add that a little bit of peas and a little bit of carrots and a taste of corn, all intermingled together. Makes it what it is. Take any one of it out, it won't taste quite the same. Take many out, and it won't taste at all good. Well, dear hearts, we're glad that you stopped by. The state of I'm just going to sum it up right now. The state of the people with disabilities, in many instances, we're in a worse state than ever before. Certainly worse than the 26 years, nearly 27 years ago, when the ADA was first established. We're going backward. We're not going forward, we're going backward. And many of it's because of attitudes, not because the law has changed. The law don't ever change. The Civil Rights Law of 1964 is still intact as a written piece of paper. The ADA is still intact as a written piece of paper. But the people's attitude towards these laws are becoming more and more hostile, less and less conciliatory. And we're now becoming more and more distant one from another. And if we don't watch ourselves, what we see now is only the tip of the iceberg. There's even more things worse to come if we don't get ourselves together now. So, dear hearts, keep your eyes on what you need to be looking at. Keep your eyes on the prize of justice, equality, liberty, inclusion for everybody, and excluding nobody. Because only together can we make this dream of America come true. Until Friday, 3 o'clock, I say goodbye. Adieu, adios, au revoir, das vidania. Once again, goodbye.